Hey guys, Alex here. Hope you're all well. This one is for the Ableton Live users exclusively because we're going to be talking about Ultramapper, which was our Max for Live device, which we include with your Rhythmizer downloads. And what I love about Rhythmizer is that I'm just always walking around getting ideas of things to randomize. And Ultramapper is that perfect bridge to turn Rhythmizer's 4 MIDI CC slots, those randomization slots, into actual Ableton randomization, right? It's bridging Rhythmizer's output to any control in Ableton Live. So I was thinking, what if you had just one bit of MIDI, which was being arpeggiated and not being sent to one synth, but like multiple synths. The same MIDI, but multiple synths and sort of flicking in between them. And this is where the instrument rack, especially the chain selector, is just perfect. So here's a little jam session I set up a couple hours ago. So what we have going on here is, here's the input MIDI, here's my chord sequence, that's going into Rhythmizer, and here in Rhythmizer, down here in the map panel, I'm using my 1, 2, 3, 4 MIDI slots to send to CC4, CC5, CC6, and CC7. And I can send that MIDI CC anywhere. I'm sending it to Ultramapper. So here on my synth destination channel, I've just put Ultramapper, right? I literally just dragged it in, and I've got the 4 slots set to CC4, CC5, 6, and 7, right? And you can set those to any CC input you want to convert it into sort of Ableton Live randomization. Now, if you haven't got around to using Ultramapper yet, and you're looking for how to install it, come here to your downloads. We'll go MIDI maps, Ultramapper, and then you can actually just drag it right into your Ableton project. I'm not going to do that because that would sort of mess with the setup I've got. But once you do that, if you just hit this little save sign here, that will save it to your user library. From there, you can give it like a color category, right? So I've got my Ultramapper set to the Max category. So when I come here, it's kind of permanently saved to my Max devices. So I've got the chain selector on the first slot, CC4. Over here in Rhythmizer, that first slot is CC4. That's being linked to the map LFO, right? Map LFO down here. Here's the map LFO. So you'll see if I turn up the rate on this LFO, that's going faster and faster. And now it's flicking between these 4 synths at a crazy rate. Maybe we'll turn it down a little bit, right? So I literally just in this slot put map and hit that chain, and now the map LFO is literally linked to the chain selector. Now, if you're not super familiar with Instrument Rack, and honestly I wasn't a few years ago, you can set up multiple synths to receive just one bit of MIDI. So this first one is an operator preset called Herbie Funk Lead. The second one, analog flute lead. Now if I again unmap this chain selector, and I'm just going to solo this, I can use it to manually scroll between these sounds. So and as I come over here to this sort of section, now it's playing the analog flute sound. I'll bring it over here. It's a nice, soft, majestic FM sound. And then finally, I wanted to add some mallets. So I love this idea that we have one sort of MIDI line playing, but it's playing through different synths. So it's sort of like a sort of multi-dimensional, multifaceted sound. Let's once again hook up that MIDI CC. And maybe I'll put it, maybe I'll put it on a quarter. And you can see I actually have the regions overlapping. So I kind of considered this second synth to be like my main synth. I want it to have quite a high probability that it'll be hit, so I've made it big. Whereas by making this third one like a smaller region, that means it's sort of less likely to fall under the chain, to be selected by the chain. And of course, I can use the range here as well to have just small amounts of the range. And then I just did a little bit of mixing here on these 4 different sounds. I kind of wanted to equalize them, get them sort of like at the same level, same tonality, so it feels more like a sort of amorphous single organism almost. Did a little bit of panning there. And then so the second slot here, right, CC5, we have that linked to the filter cutoff on one of the synths. And that is receiving CC from velocity, right? So if I turn the velocity right the way down, see, we're not getting any CC. And as I turn this up, we're getting that readout there. This third slot is groove 1 randomization, right? So that's groove 1. This 8th note here. So this means that every time that an 8th note is randomly triggered, that's going to send out a little sort of pulse. So if I turn this down, you can see not getting anything. The more I turn it up, the more we're getting random CC sent out to this third slot, right? And that is going to the attack on one of the synths, perhaps this one. It's going to the attack on one of those 4 synths. And finally, I've got CC7 being generated by actually the scale notes in the arpeggiator. So if I turn this all the way up, let's just get this on an upward direction. You'll see it's sending upwards, kind of MIDI CC. And sure enough, down here, you see that. And if I turn this down, for instance, and again, we're seeing that same readout here. And that's actually sending to this send right here, right? So this is the send amount. Here's the send. This is just a sort of echo reverb effect. And so the scale ARP is sending out different amounts to that send via slot 7 right there. So you can see it actually ascending just like the scale notes. And so that's how I'm using Ultramapper as a sort of Max for Live bridge between Rhythmizer and the rest of Ableton Live. I'll take you very quickly through the rest of the project as well, just because we're here. So I also had these choirs here. And I have the volume on a fader, as well as a high shelf. And what I actually want to point out here is that the MIDI input for these choirs is also coming from the same MIDI input that's going into Rhythmizer. However, I didn't want to get the randomized output of Rhythmizer. I wanted to just get the raw MIDI. If I just call this channel, say, ARP MIDI or raw MIDI, right? Now, over here on these 2 choir channels, it's getting the MIDI from raw MIDI, but I haven't selected the Rhythmizer Fusion, right? That's not selected there. So it's just getting the raw MIDI and it's bypassing Rhythmizer altogether. And that's pretty cool because it means that if I was to change the MIDI going into Rhythmizer, we get different output. Let's go back to our original raw MIDI. Because what I did is I took this MIDI over here and I duplicated it into this sort of sub bass channel. and muted everything except for those low bass notes. So another cool thing I was playing with here was I put Saturn on our instrument track with the 4 synths and samplers on it. And I had that really, really cranked up, and I was literally just moving the dry wet. So there's some great discordant. And because I didn't want really distorted stuff going too hard into the reverb send, what I've actually done is I've got it sort of a counter action happening here. So as I turn up that reverb, it's turning down the reverb send. It's a really big part of how I work when I'm programming synths, and by having actions which have a counter action to sort of keep everything balanced. Finally, I had just some sampled noise on top, and some kind of bird foley here just to get some top texture. Incredibly quiet, just kind of filling up the space, just like with just a very subtle texture. And yeah, so that's randomizing stuff with Rhythmizer, using our Futurephonic Ultramapper Max for Live device as a bridge to randomize anything in Ableton Live. Get experimenting with it, have fun. We'll chat soon. Bye.